the Empress Hour. It's 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 the Empress Hour.
And if you don't know about his name, then you either too young or you just too out of tune.
No doubt.
But I am so delighted and pleased to welcome Judge Joe Brown to this broadcast tonight.
In terms of how she has put herself in the position with her hard work. My personal thoughts toward her is that I do not like her perspective when it comes to pedophilia. I do not like the fact that she has been lenient toward people who have been found guilty in the pedophilia area.
All right. Welcome to the Empress Hour. I am your host, Shonda M. Parks, broadcasting at the Mighty Media TV Network, GFN Global TV. Hi, gratitude for tuning in and thank you for your support. Go out and share this broadcast with everyone that you know. And you can follow me, ShondaMParks.me. Again, that is ShondaMParks.me. Tonight, we have a very esteemed guest, Dr. Carole H. Haynes, National Education Policy Analyst and Advisor, commentator, writer, historian, business owner, classical pianist, and baby, she is highly sought after. I tell you, this is one very, very classy lady. It's so much more, but I am not going to say anything else. I'm going to welcome her to the show. Dr. Carole, welcome, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. It is my honor, my pleasure to be here with you. I am so excited. We are going to have so much to talk about.
Oh, yes, I'm so looking forward to it. Now, listen, I know I didn't tell your entire resume, which is very long, by the way, but is there some things that you would like to share with people about yourself?
Tell them about myself. I think you did. Well, we just stayed busy. And then when I realized what was going on with the schools, I said, it's time to just jump back in because I've been devoting myself to our businesses. But I spent a lot of time speaking and going out and testifying at the SBOE and at the state level and working with lawmakers and working with parents. I worked with a lot of parents who really were so surprised when they found out what was going on. And that is gratifying to see everybody waking up and getting involved. So to say that, there's ever a case in my life of retiring, it's not going to happen. I think we're going to be really busy till we get called home.
Wow. Well, I tell you, everyone, we are delighted that you are here. Our subject tonight is pre-K education all it's cracked up to be? And as we start talking yesterday, we were like, that is a mouthful. Because Dr. Carole, our children are so important to us. And, it's like we need to take precedence in how we handle them. But before we really get into that, I would like for you to give us a historical timeline and tell us what did education look like before pre-K came into existence?
Much better. Let's first start with this. Now, I love that you want to start with the history because that people don't understand why we are where we are today or what's actually going on in the classroom now. And you hear a lot about social and emotional learning. But just going back, for years, our lawmakers have been trying to pass laws to get for universal pre-K. That means free public pre-K. What our Americans don't understand is that government control over the rearing and education of young children is a key communist goal for turning America into a totalitarian nation. And the reason is you've got to have government control to control people, and they want to start with the very young. But going back in the 1800s, before we had any public education, we literally had the most literate nation in the entire world. In 1812, our nation, let's see, it was 1812, we had 99.6% people who were literate, and even women were literate. They could read. And the reason it was so important for American colonists to learn to read is they wanted to learn to read the Bible. That was really high priority. So coming from there, then today we have a 33% literacy rate. So what's happened? And pre-K fits into all of this. Well, in the early 1800s, around 1837, somewhere in there, Horace Mann established the first public schools. It actually was in 1837, but he was doing this in Massachusetts. And he, along with that, set up teacher colleges, because the goal was for government control of what children were learning, and then the teachers' control of what they were going to teach the children. And then very gradually, they were moving toward a different kind of United States. The goal of public education was to take Christianity out of the classroom, Christianity out of our nation, in fact, to put in secular humanism. And then they were just gradually going to move students where they were more and more going to be controlled by these schools. The goal was to get rid of Christianity, to put in secular humanism, and then the United States was eventually be turned into a totalitarianism, and that's where we are today. Now, you've heard about Vladimir Lenin, who said, "Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I've sown will never be
yes.
uprooted." Saying, if you give them to me 4 years, they're mine forever. They will never change. They will be totally indoctrinated. So, fast forward. Before 1980, we had very few children who were in public education. There were just a few 4-year-olds here, there, and yonder. But after 1980, and up to now, we have 2/3 of the 4-year-olds who are in pre-K. So that has been the problem. That's where we are now, with so many of them in there. And the schools are creating the problems, and then they're trying to fix the problems, which we'll come back to in our conversation. But have I given you some kind of background on this?
Yes, and I want to say that, I find it very intriguing that the schools that we have today, these big Coliseum-like schools, but that children were taught in small settings. They were taught in church settings. They were taught in local towns with their parents and organized groups. They had private tutoring and homeschooling. Like homeschooling now, it seems like it's a big phenomenon, but homeschooling is not new. And many people are acting as if homeschooling is new. But as I'm looking on some of the documentations that you sent, by the way, and if you're open to that, I can share some of these documents with some of our parents, because this information is absolutely valuable, that we need to know this history that has been presented to us. Wow. I'm telling you. Well, hey, listen, you all, go ahead.
And you're exactly right, is that the children were educated by their parents, by the schools, or in the little one-room schoolhouses within a town. Now, they might call it public education then, but it was not like public education now. It just meant that maybe the parents in the town just paid for it. But there was no state control. There was no formalized where you had to do this or that. And then after a while, they said, well, you can't have homeschooling. And some states ruled it out. We finally got it back in. But today, people say, well, I don't have time to homeschool my child. There are many, many ways that we just say, another word is free market education. And that means it's just non-government education, non-public education. And they're the pods, and you have micro schools. You have parents coming together, and some of them will teach some, and one will teach another course or whatever. But there's lots of material out there, just tons of stuff. Parents don't have to be certified. In fact, they found that there is no correlation between how well a child learns and whether a teacher is certified or not. and I'll have to tell you this, I am not for teacher certification. I am for teacher being certified as far as not certified, but having a test about what they know, but not being just certified through the colleges of education, because that is government control. So yes, you're right. 3 times, in 2020 till now, the number of homeschooled children have gone up 3 times.
Wow.
And the number of the Black families doing homeschooling has gone up 5-fold.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. And I find that awesome. Now, for me, I homeschooled 2 of my children. I have 4 children, and I homeschooled 2 of my sons. And my daughter and I have homeschooled together her children. But before we go forward, there's something that I also found very intriguing about the philosophy that was in the past that we need to go back and recapture. And I want to talk about that. And that was that they wanted to teach virtues. They wanted to teach good citizenship. They wanted to teach morals, and they wanted to teach people how to build upon their character. And these are things that we don't hear today. We're just not hearing this because we're dealing with a morally corrupt society. And so what I would like for you to, in saying that, can you tell us what normal behavior should look like in a child that is 3 or 4 years old? What should they be doing? Because what they have them doing right now is drilling literacy in their head, drilling math skills, getting them ready for testing. I call it high stakes testing. So please, Dr. Carole, give us your analyzation on that.
Well, it's fascinating. If you watch a 3 or 4 year old child, they can just amuse themselves at end. They should not be sitting at a desk with this formalized instruction. In fact, they don't learn well that way. They learn best by free play. And you know, and because since you homeschool, you understand this totally. They learn, and they don't really need to be in formalized studies until they're like 7 years old. They can learn in 1 year when they're in early elementary. They can learn in 1 year what they learned all the time in pre-K. But when they're in pre-K, our pre-K has gone from free play now to formalized studies where they sit long periods of time and they're actually learning math, and they're learning to read, they're learning to write. There's nothing special about a child learning to read and write at 3 and 4 years old. And you will have these people who want to get this. I'm talking about those who want to have universal pre-K so that it will be government controlled. They will say, well, 85% of a child's brain is developed within the first 5 years. That's not true. The brain continues to develop all the way through age 25 and even beyond. So the older the child is getting, as I said, 7 years of age, even in Finland, they don't let their children start before age 7, and they are ranked highest in the world in their literacy, their education. So how should they look? Our young children should be running around and playing free play. It should not be structured play. And I will tell you this is when they really, really learn to become creative. And since our children, and let's go back to the timing. I said before 1980 that very few 4-year-olds were in preschool. And then after 1980, up to now, 2/3 of the 4-year-olds are in pre-K. Well, in the 1990s, we started to see a downturn in our creative scores. And that's very important because that downturn means that America has shifted. We know that Americans have been a feisty, spirited, independent-minded people, and we are creative. And you know, you'll have these young kids going out there, like some of my family members, and at 6 years old, they were taking apart mom's air conditioner, and at 9, taking apart her car battery. Her car engine. And so we don't see that so much now. The reason is our students are not allowed this creative. Everything is structured around them. They're not supposed to do this. They're not supposed to do that. So with this downturn of the creative scoring, America was the most inventive nation on the face of the earth. Our people were so creative. Our students were allowed to be so creative that you remember so many of the inventions in the world came from Americans. So as we push those out into foreign nations, we've become very rich because of it. But now this has changed. Well, as this changes, it is affecting our national economy, and it's affecting with how we go forward on national issues where we need to have a creative spirit out there. And in fact, our literacy rate, I said earlier that our literacy rate has gone from 99.6% down to 33% today of graduating seniors nationally.
That's ridiculous.
Because of that, we are losing nearly $2 trillion in our economy each year. And all of that also includes this creativity.
You know, Dr. Carole, I want to now again, one of the informations that you sent me, it talked about the creativity, and it said that Americans' creativity score has been steadily falling since 1990. And when I read that, what popped in my mind was imagination, because that's one of the words that I like to spend a lot of time on. Because imagination is very, very critical to our children. Because when you learn imagination, you learn to reason. And this is another thing that our children are losing, because they're being forced to sit down and drilled, so they don't have reasoning skills. So consequently, if they don't have reasoning skills, then that means that as they grow and mature, they're supposed to mature, but they're having problems with that. And we can talk about that too. But in that imagination, they get the reasoning skills, you get chronological order. These are things that children just need to know, but if they're not being able to express themselves, then that's a major oversight. They don't get that back. That's the other part. As a writer I write short stories. I always talk to people about igniting their creativity, igniting their imagination. And you could see when you look outside in this society that there are so many people that don't have imagination. And how can you recognize that? People look alike. They dress alike. They wear the same hairstyles. They wear the same clothes. They drive in the same cars. So the creativity has been lost. And that is absolutely major. And that was across the board. We all had fantastic inventors, but we need to get that back. And that's why we're having a wonderful conversation tonight. So before we take a short break, what I would like for you to do is to tell us some of the things that in your observation that according to that Harvard study, because I want to come to that. We did talk about that very briefly yesterday, because that Harvard study is awesome and amazing. It gives us a lot of insight. So in your opinion, with them taking our children and at the age of 3 and 4, what are some of the consequences that our children are suffering right now?
Well, if they haven't been allowed in, I'm going to tell you what, this is a report from some of the veteran teachers that I had found here. I don't know if I sent this. I don't think I sent this one to you, but this was something I found that I'd written for the National Center for Policy Analysis years ago. And why do so many children have DHD? And what the teachers were finding is that there's been a dramatic change in the behavior over several generations of children. And at one time, children would, they were just free-flowing their imagination. Now they say, oh, well, that's not true. You shouldn't be saying that. That's not true. But children have a vivid imagination until they're shut down by adults. Well, this teacher said, today's youngsters cry easily. They fall out of chairs frequently. They run into walls and other children, and they're less attentive. Some will repeatedly strike themselves in rhythmic patterns, or they'll rock back and forth. And here's something else. If they've not been allowed to have a lot of free play prior to the age of 7, they're, especially outdoors, they're more likely to exhibit problems with social interactions, paying attention, problem solving, anxiety, controlling their emotions, and clumsiness. And then when this happens in elementary school, then what happens? Our schools jump in with all these coping skills and everything else. And the magic word right now, is social emotional learning. And they're saying, well, what's happened to our kids? Okay, well, the schools have caused this. And now the schools come back in and say, we're going to fix it. And we're going to be sending you to the mental health counselor. And you've got all these problems. Yeah, these are problems that the school created.
Yes,
and one of them is going
something.
back to the present day.
That's really something. Because they're feeding into the pharmaceutical industry. Everything is so if they're diagnosed as ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and based on them putting children in these situations, I think they're creating this. So if they're creating it, then they're already creating the opportunity for the pharmaceuticals to profit on these children while they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. But what happened to them later on? That's a whole nother story. What happens to them as they progress along? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back and pick up with this where we are, because I want to know, when we come back, if you can tell us the difference between ADHD and autism, because both of these are on the rise. Yes, indeed they are. So thank you all for tuning in. You are here on the Empress Hour. We're going to take a short break, and we will be right back here at the Mighty Media TV Network, GFN Global TV, having a wonderful conversation with Dr. Carole.
It's the Empress Hour. 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 It's the Empress Hour.
Introducing Judge Joe Brown's all-new barbecue sauce and seasoning. Justice in the form of flavor. With one taste of our premium blends of all-natural ingredients, herbs, and spices, you'll fall in love with meat all over again. Judge Joe Brown's all-natural barbecue sauce collection is made up of 2 zesty flavors, original and spicy. There's only one way to bring order back to barbecuing. Just add Judge Joe Brown's all-natural barbecue sauce and seasoning, and you be the judge.
Love lower than low prices? Then get more ways to save at Kroger, where you can find personalized coupons, weekly deals, and rewards like fuel points. All for prices that are lower than low. On food that's fresher than fresh. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
All right, we back from break.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. You are tuned in to the Empress Hour here at the Mighty Media TV Network, GFN Global TV. We are having a fantastic conversation with our subject tonight. Is pre-K education all it's cracked up to be? And our esteemed guest is Dr. Carole Haynes. So, Dr. Carole, before we took our brief break, I wanted you to come back and talk to us about ADHD compared to autism. On the rise, both of them have risen tremendously, and that is very troublesome to me. So can you talk to us about that?
Yes, I had never really seen that when I was a teacher, Shonda. It just wasn't there. I mean, some of the worst things the kids did was maybe throw a spit wad or now, that doesn't mean there weren't special education children, but they just, it wasn't that kind of behavior. I didn't see the ADHD. And let's define that. That is just really a short attention span. The children are distracted easily. Well, you can't expect them to have long attention spans on anything when they're young anyhow. And so we're expecting too much out of them. And so there's more pressure there. But before I go forward on the ADHD and the Harvard study, I know you want to come back to that. Let's look at autism. That is just a limited scope of interest. They seem to, these children seem to obsess over the things that they really enjoy, and they have great difficulty focusing on things that they have no interest in. And it's very difficult for them, and they need a lot of attention, a lot of special, it would be more like special needs. Their teachers need to be trained in how to work with autistic children.
Dr. Carole, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
My brother, his son has autism, and you said like several years back when you was teaching that you really never seen kids with autism and things like that, and that it seems like to be something that's really happening today. Can you touch on that?
I think the school environment is so difficult and so different now. The children are exposed to everything under the sun. Let's start with this. For decades now, we have had comprehensive sex education in our schools. And we have no reason to be teaching sex education in schools. It doesn't need to be in there. We don't even have enough time for the ABCs because they're so busy with social emotional learning, comprehensive sex ed, teaching them to hate their country, teaching them to hate each other, teaching them to hate their God. So when I was teaching, we strictly focused on just simply the 3 R's, and that was it. We didn't bring in anything else. We didn't bring in politics. We didn't bring in radical sex. We didn't bring in, okay, we're going to have this social emotional learning today. As Sandra said earlier, at one time, teaching character was just a part of the school. This was just something that went on every day, just like moms were teaching their children, socializing, you might say, teaching them how to behave with each other. And we haven't been doing that. What we're doing is teaching the children bad ways of behavior. So when these children then are going to school too early and they're being forced into bad behavior patterns, sitting all day long, we have found that those who have been in these pre-K, for instance, here's a Vanderbilt study up in Tennessee. Tennessee's my home state, so I've been watching this study for a long time, for several years. And they found, and they just came out with the final report on it, and they found that children who did not attend the pre-K program actually were better off down the road academically and behavior-wise. By the end of the 6th grade, those in the study were more likely to be referred to special education services. They would have discipline problems. They fared worse on the on the academic testing. And then there have been other, and this goes along, Wayne, with what you were asking. Here are some studies. They found that children who had been in non-maternal child care, they had, this means taken away from their home, away from their grandmothers. And Judge Joe touched on this the other day, Shonda, and I told you I found that so fascinating. For those who haven't heard that program, it was a fascinating and fabulous hour that you had with him. And he was talking about single parent homes, and so often with the father not there, where they found that when they took the children away from the non-maternal and they put them in these daycares and put them in pre-K, that these children had more behavioral problems. They were more apt to be aggressive, bullying, lack of control. And by age 23, they showed some of them were having felony offenses and work and marital problems. But all in all, and then even later, they became, in adult life, they were becoming very angry and active impulsively and disturbing classroom activity. But when you have these children taken out of the normal 3 R's and they're put into rigid formal classes, unlike totally where they're supposed to be in life, they are going to develop some problems. In fact, this study that I was just referencing, the Vanderbilt study, found that the children, when they were taken away from their parents, became very, very distressed. And I think it's called the cortisol level, it was spiking. And then they would put them with their teachers, and then they would have to bond with their teachers. And then they would go back, they'd leave their teachers, go back home. And so all the time, these children showed levels of high anxiety on both sides because they were being taken away from their home base and being forced into a situation where that's not where you want to see a 3 or 4 year old. Have you noticed that when you take your child away and the last thing they're doing when you're walking out or or someone is walking away with them is they're crying and
They're
reaching
crying.
out to you.
Yeah, they're crying. Yeah, and Dr. Carol, I just to also come back to Wayne's question, is we had Dr. Judy Mikovich on a show as well, and she shedded a lot of light on some things that I think that could be added in here that can contribute to some of the behavior things. Of course, ADHD is something within itself, but what they are doing is medicating the children, but it's not solving the problem. And then you have a lot of children who are suffering from autism, and a lot of that has been induced by the pharmaceutical industry, by what they put into to the syringes that our children are being
Vaccinated?
Yes, I was trying not to say that. You know, that's a word that gets you canceled around here, saying that word.
I've been slammed for saying I don't believe in vaccinating these children. They have about 60 now by the time they're 18.
Absolutely.
And they know there's mercury in there.
Yes. And so now you have, so now not only are you forcing them to act in a unnatural way by forcing them with this drill type of education, but now you are putting poison in them that is getting into their system. So what I see, and we're going to come back to this Harvard study, but that's okay. But we flowing, and I love that. But what this make me realize is that this is all creating a pipeline to prisons, and especially in the Black community, because 80% of the jails, the prisons are filled with Black people, but yet Black people are only 12% of the population. So you know that's bothersome. That's something that we have to examine, and us coming here today, examining this conversation about pre-K. I didn't send my children to pre-K. I thought that it just didn't make sense to me. I'm a mother of 4, and none of my children went to pre-K. It was not reasonable, and no, I don't really encourage it for my grandchildren, but I don't have control over all of them. So, but having this conversation will give us the opportunity to rethink what we are doing to our children. Because even if they do not go to prison, I have seen children who are 27 years old and they make some of the worst decisions. They just do not have good decision-making process. And Dr. Carole, have you seen that as well?
Yes, sometimes sometimes I just wonder if they have a brain at all, I guess you could say. And we simply don't have the leadership that's coming out of the schools. But this is by design, because if you don't have literate people, you don't have a free country. And if you don't have a free country, then you're going to be under some kind of dictatorship or socialism. But yes, you'll notice that those at the top don't send their children to the same school that the others go to.
No, they do not.
Special schools, because they're going to be the leaders. So they want us to have a few very smart leaders who make good rational decisions. Well, I know I take that back. Sometimes I think even they don't. But then we have the others. But yes, I don't see really good decision making.
And that is a pity. Now, I'm going to read a quote that was in this Harvard study. And this quote says, "Our findings suggest the possibility that large number of kids are being overdiagnosed and overtreated for ADHD because they have happened to be relatively immature compared to their older classmates in the early years of elementary school." And I'm read that quote, and then I'm gonna tell you something that my son said to me. He's 28 now. And he said to me today, because he was asking me what was the subject, and I told him the subject. He was like, "Oh, that's a good subject." And he said that what he noticed, that when he was in school, that the children that had come through the pre-K, he said that they were timid, they cried a lot. He said that, you know, they couldn't sit still. He said that they had behavioral problems. He noticed this. And so, and he, you know, that's something for him to notice that and to remember it even to this day, that is something that he can go back in his memory. So that quote right there is telling. It's very telling, Dr. Carole. What would you like to share with us about this?
This was, I think what you're talking about is getting into the Harvard study. Can we go there?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That's exactly where that quote came from.
Okay, yes. This study goes back into 2018. And they, Harvard was running this study to see why there was such a high case, so many cases of ADHD. In fact, it had gone up for the past 20 years, it had gone up exponentially. And 1/3 of those cases are in children under 6. If that's very high.
That's very high.
This came from the CDC. And this they found was play-based kindergarten, and now preschools have been replaced, as I said earlier, by daily drilling, literacy, and math skills into young children. And then they're giving them testing. These children don't have any reason to be tested. I mean, all this sitting down and the testing that they're doing.
High stakes testing.
I was talking about the veteran teachers are seeing huge changes in them. And so it's very clear that there's this class time is being misspent, and they're spending on academic learning, and they don't need to be on academic learning that young. So they come in, and yes, they're very upset and they cry a lot, but they're stressed out. They haven't been able to do anything that little children do. You watch them. They are so fun to watch. They can take things apart. You give a child a phone. I may have trouble turning a phone on, but before the day is gone,
yes,
a child can do all these things with the phone. They can do all these things with puzzles or whatever, and they can just create everything. And they're great at doing rhythms. As you pointed out, I'm a classically trained pianist. And one of the fun things is giving children something that they can beat on, and you can hear their patterns of their rhythm. And we find that children who have studied music really do very, very well in STEM courses later. And those who have been, I found that some stats on this that I had written some time ago. It was really unusual, because I was looking at Jack Ma, who had founded Alibaba, and he said the reason that he was able to create this huge company was because of his creativity, his ability, because he didn't go to school in China. He went outside of China, so he said, I actually enjoyed my school. But here's what is so interesting, that adults who have participated in arts and crafts during childhood filed more patents and founded more businesses in the STEM fields than those that had not. And then those who participated in artistic activities in adulthood also correlated with greater success as an inventor. And if you don't allow children this time, and when do they have time for arts and crafts right now? They're so busy going from SEL to sex education,
yes,
and a few hours of, whatever they're learning in literacy,
yes,
and they're not even learning cursive, phonics, and you know all about phonics. They're teaching them whole language. Yes. And that's the kiss of death right there.
And you know what, Dr. Carole, isn't it? It's really something that what you just expressed to us is so powerful about creative learning, but yet those are the least funded programs. In matter of fact, some schools don't even have art, and that is terrible to know that they don't have art, and art is a part of the expression. Art is a part that unlocks the mind. Art gives them the opportunity to have both sides of their brains working, but yet we are basically denying them the opportunity to expand themselves. And so
and the schools or the colleges are pulling it out, as you probably know.
I didn't know the colleges was pulling it out too.
And listen to this, the STEM graduates, and I know I interrupted you, so let's go back to what you said, but I want to put in here what you were saying about that. The STEM graduates had a higher than average involvement in visual arts, acting, dancing, and creative writing. Musical training seemed to be highly important, with 93% of the study group having studied music at some point. And that's what you were just saying. is that they no longer have it.
And see, that's a free thinking person, because when you're creative, that takes us back to that imagination. You can make reasonable decisions. You can listen to the information, and you can put the information in its proper perspectives. But if they destroy all of that, and then they put you into their classrooms for 4 years, just like Vladimir Lenin said, then they got you. They have your child. And we no longer recognize them when they come back, especially from college now. You don't recognize your child. You're like, what did you do? What happened? We don't know. But this is being done on purpose, as you said. Tell us about the Biden administration and how they're complicit with this universal pre-K program.
Oh, wow. They wanted billions of dollars out there. I want to say like $400 billion that they wanted thrown into universal pre-K. In other words, they wanted all children forced into pre-K. Well, as it turns out, that none of that went anywhere. And so Biden himself said, well, he was going to have his own program. And so he, in his State of the Union address, he said that he branded this failed Build Back Better as his bill, and he said it was going to cut inflation, it was going to grow the economy, it was going to lower costs, it was going to lower the deficit. And then he said, I'm going to have free pre-K. He just said pre-K, which is free, universal, for every 3 and 4 year old. Well, they didn't get all the money that was wanted, but they did get $40 billion. And that is spread over pre-K and child development. And this is government pre-K and government child development. And we know already that Head Start has been a bust for the last 65 years. It has never made any difference whatsoever. And in fact, children are worse off for having gone there. So yes, and they're not going to give up this pre-K. And let me add something there. Talking about money, let's say they can't find the money. Okay, we're in Texas, all of us are in Texas. So if they can't find it here, and we don't have universal pre-K here in our state, so if they can't find the money, there are devious ways to get those programs funded. And one of these is called the social impact bonds. And I don't know if our audience, our radio audience is familiar with these, but this was something, I think maybe I sent this to you, Sonda, that it's social impact bonds, and it's investing by putting up private capital to start like a pre-K program. So what happens, you have Goldman Sachs who will go over and they say, okay, you want a pre-K program over here. So we're going to get these bonds out there and raise this money and issue bonds. And with that, we can fund your program. Well, the politicians fall all over themselves. Oh, here's like free money. But what they don't understand is now, in order to get that investment, you have to have some measurement to judge an investment. You've got to have some kind of data. You've got to have a starting point and where you've gone and where you end up. So to do that, they do a lot of data mining, and then that is just the government getting a lot more information, because the stock market, this is public information that they have out there. So the government is going to have access to it. Well, Goldman Sachs did this. They had a program in Chicago pre-K. They put in $16.6 million in investment. They got out a return of $30 million from the city, and the program was unsuccessful. And the deal is, it doesn't matter how much Goldman Sachs raises. The politicians say, oh, this sounds very good, and they get into it, but the politicians never look to see that the pre-K programs have never been successful. And so they're doing the wrong things with the students, and they're ripping off the investors. I mean, here is this one right here. They did in Utah. There was a program in 2012 in Utah with Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs got a full payout, but they always say, well, if we can get these kids into pre-K, they'll be better off, save you money on down the way. If you get them caught early, it'll save you money. And if you remember, I said that they will say, well, 85% of a child's brain is developed in the first 5 years. We know that's a lie, but that's what they use to get the politicians to jump on board. Well, in every case that the investors are getting their money, but look at the city, look at the taxpayers.
Yes, and they're sacrificing the children. It's a sacrifice. You sacrificing a whole nation of children.
They're always sacrificed. They're sacrificed when the big check goes in, and then they want all these kids on these computers. And I wrote a white paper, and it was about how the technology harms the academic learning of these children, and it makes them so dependent. And when they get this digital addiction, it is harder to cure than cocaine addiction. This is what they're doing to our kids, and they're doing it. You have big pharma, big tech, big Goldman Sachs.
All of them are complicit. Wow.
They're all complicit, and I have not seen the difference. You know, we go to Washington, and I'm seeing both parties complicit, and I wonder. I write to them and say, you know, you're supposed to be a Republican. You're supposed to be voting this way. They go out there, and it's just like everybody's trying to help pass this bill. And they don't care that they pass trillions of dollars that we will never pay off.
Wow. Well, Dr. Carole,
that will take our country into poverty.
We're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, there's a couple of things I would like for you to shed a little bit more light on, and that is that social emotional learning and the critical race theory, because these are some things that I find these very weird that they're pushing out here. I should have added one more to it, and that should have been the sexualizing of our children. So long we put that on there too, as I'm thinking about that. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back. You are listening to the Empress Hour with me, Shonda M. Parks, broadcasting at the Mighty Media TV Network, GFN Global TV. We'll be right back.
Going down right here. Best in Throwback Hits Radio. GFN Radio Soul. We got the Empress Hour right here with my main girl, Shonda. What's going on, love?
What's up, Wayne?
We got the beautiful, ravishing guests out there.
Yes.
Miss Dr. Carole Haynes.
Carole in the house.
H. Haynes. Put some respect on that name.
Yeah.
All right, we back.
Right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Empress Hour. I am your host, Shonda M. Parks, and we have a very esteemed guest with us tonight, Dr. Carole H. Haynes in the house.
Supermodel.
Yes. I tell you, you know what, Wayne, I like that music. I don't know what it was, but it made me think about our conversation before we went to break about creativity and imagination.
Oh, yeah.
And what it made me reflect on is that the music that we hear today with the young children is that we can't understand what they're saying.
Right.
And that music was calm. It was soulful. So I was able to appreciate that. And so that too has a lot to do with the children and how they are acting out their creativity. They know they need to act it out, but how they act it out,
right,
you know, is what I'm bringing to the table is that we don't know what they're saying.
Hey, Doc, do you have any videos with you on doing your thing, doing your shows on the piano or anything like that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I said, do you have any videos of anything that you're doing, like when you doing your concert pianist and all that?
Are you said about the piano? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, don't you play the piano?
I do,
And
but
I
I
say,
don't have videos.
you don't
Maybe
have-
I should make some videos.
Yeah,
Oh,
you need
yes.
that's your legacy, you know? I mean, you gotta have
Yes.
something that people can see that you're doing. So, you know, even if one day we just call in and you just get in front of your piano and we take a video of you getting down on that piano, you
Ooh,
gotta
that
have
would
something
be
out
nice.
I love that. I love that idea. Now, there's a creative man. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, I'm from Memphis, and you know, we had soul music there. That was the birthplace of rock and roll. It was the birthplace of rhythm and blues.
Captain Bilbo.
And then you have all the country music over there. You have gospel music. You have black gospel music, and then jazz. And American music is Southern music. That's what is all there. And then you have the Western music out here in Texas. So I mean, it's so exciting what we have. And yes, since I like all these types of music, I should be doing that.
And you from Memphis, Tennessee?
I am.
So you know Captain Bilbo's. You know Captain Bilbo's.
Pardon me?
Captain Bilbo's. That was a restaurant out there.
Where was that?
That was not too far from where a Martin Luther King monument was at, right off the waterfront. Because we opened up a Landry Seafood out there in '92, and it was, I think it was a Captain Bilbo's or Captain Jim's. It was one of the two.
I didn't know that.
It was right off the front down there. I can't think it. Right off of close to where Danny Thomas Boulevard runs.
Oh, and you know, when I go home, I don't go the loop. I always want to go through the town.
Right.
So I come off the bridge and I go up Poplar. And
okay.
So I can see everything there. And it's interesting how much that things have changed, but they wanted to change. I'm talking about so that we never remember our Southern roots, never remember our American roots. They wanted Dallas to change. They said, we don't want it to be recognized like anything. We don't want our nation to change. We want America. We don't want a China over here.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And that is some of the weird things that I'm noticing. All of this weirdness, these new theories and new processes that they're bringing in toward education, the sexualizing of our children, the social and emotional learning, that critical race theory, So, Dr. Carole, talk about those things right there.
Okay, social emotional. This actually, people think it's brand new. It's not. It's been around since the early 1900s. You always have these nut jobs who are trying to tinker with children's minds, and they would get out there and they'd say, well, we're going to teach them that they can behave like animals. They'll move on command, and that's not how children should be taught, but that's how they want them taught. So they've been tinkering around for just many, many decades. Then in 2015, well, actually, under it was Goals 2000, we had this was coming in. I had written a paper about this when it had come in, about the federalized control, that SEL was key in all of this federal legislation: No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, Common Core, and Every Student Succeeds Act. And then the Goals 2000, they got a lot of heavy mental health grounds in there for children. And then when they were trying to centralize education, and this goes back under, I think it was under the Clintons, Mark Tucker had put together this plan that to centralize education and change it from academic to workforce learning for a nationally managed economy. And so they were putting in this SEL all in there. Well, then in 2015, at the end of 2015, they passed this legislation, Every Student Succeeds Act, and they said then that academic learning will no longer be the number one purpose of education. It's going to be social and emotional learning. Well, fast forward, that's exactly what is going on. And we know that For many, many years, the communists, the Marxists have been using radical sex education to change student behavior. They do this to undermine our Christian family values. They actually were doing this in a beta test over in 1990 in Hungary, and they put together this program, a curriculum, where children were given all this explicit sexual content and read this stuff, and then it wasn't long that they were being taught to disrespect the clergy, disrespect their parents, to disrespect their teachers. And it wasn't long until they became bullies. They became mentally stressed out. They were having they were committing murder. They were committing suicide. They were stealing. And then you have the same thing now. We have been putting sex education, comprehensive sex education in our schools. And we're using social and emotional learning as a vehicle for pushing it into the classroom. And what it's doing is making the children mentally ill, it's making them confused. And what the goal is to separate the parents from the children, because they say, don't tell your parents that you're going to be a transgender. Don't tell your parents because they won't understand. Now, children aren't, the number of transgenders in the world is very, very small. But because children go through, this, Sean, they go through this when they're in puberty. Kids are they're so depressed, they're so upset. They always have things that they're concerned over. This is very normal. And for the most part, they always grow out of it. Right. And then you have social emotional learning that is also the vehicle for pushing critical race theory into the classroom. So now SEL is pushing in radical sex, is pushing in critical race theory to create hatred for America and whites. Now, white is not white skin. It's anybody who supports capitalism, free markets, limited government, traditional values, and our traditions. Now, they put all this together. Now you have one huge messed up kid. Yes. The next thing they do is they then start to teach them how to go out in the community and become a revolutionary. So this is called action civics. Now, they did this under Mao in China, and they used the young people to go out. They called them the Red Guards, and they would pit the old against the young. And that's what they're doing here. They're sending these young people out into the streets, and they end up joining Black Lives Matter. They end up joining Antifa. And these are our Red Guard. And our schools are doing this. Now, they say they're not. They are doing this. The problem is our government, our national government, has funded billions of dollars. And in Texas, we got $12.4 billion for that's called ESSER funding, and it was to help, quote, supposedly to reopen the schools after the shutdowns. But what they did is they said 20% of this is going to social and emotional learning, and out of that, we're going to have to re-educate the teachers into critical race theory. No. Here you go, and now we've got social and emotional learning that is now part of our Texas Education Code and is integrated into our state curriculum. Now is being integrated for K through 12. So parents can't really opt out. So it's a big mess. And it's by design, as you said.
Yes, this is by design. And that's what's really terrible about this, is that this design is being carried out and it's everywhere. So they have infiltrated not only just the public schools, but I'm seeing that the private schools and the charter schools and all of these schools, even the Catholic schools, are all beginning to accept this. And that's alarming. It's very alarming. But I want to, before we depart, Dr. Carole, you got to come back because we just scratched the scratch.
I would love to come back.
Yes,
two of you have made my day.
Oh, thank you. Yes, because wow, thank you so very kindly. Yes, we just only scratched the scratch. There's so much more, that we need to talk about. But before we go, there's another quote. I know we talked about the quote that was from Vladimir Lenin, but Thomas Sowell, he had a very nice quote too. I like him. He has he's a really tight man. He has really good purpose and good morals, and that is what we need. So his quote says, The purpose of education is to give the students the intellectual tools to analyze, whether verbally or numerically, and to and to reach conclusions based on logic and evidence. And we are losing that. We have lost that. These young children do not have these basic things that we all need. So, Dr. Carole, before we go, I want you to tell everyone how they can reach you, and definitely you got to come back, no doubt about it.
That is a given. Well, I have a newsletter. It's called the Haynes Report, and it's published. It's read widely. It's read not only in the United States but internationally. Have a lot of international readers, and we're putting that up. I have a podcast, and that is Dr. Haynes Report. I can't remember the rest of it. I think you have it there. But my website is drcarolehaynes.com. Is CaroleHaynes. And the podcast, do you have it there that you can read it back to me? I think I said it, or I can find it here. Yes. But it's PodGen that you can go in, and they come up on Rumble, they come up on YouTube, and they'll come up on through Google. But it's called Dr. Haynes Report. But you can go to my website right now, and you can there are loads of all these articles we were talking about. Everything there is on my website. It may be hard to find because they go back so many years, but I'm happy to help you send those out to your audience and get those out for you. So I would love to hear from people. Please go in and read my website. If you would like to contact me, I can be reached at CHAYNES@drcarolehaynes.com. That's C Haynes at drcarolehaynes.com.
And she's married, so you frisky guys, don't be bothering her like that.
Yes.
It's too much to remember in my brain. As I told you, these children can do computers better than I can do my phone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got that right. Because my 4-year-old, I was just telling Wayne when I came tonight, he was trying to negotiate for my other phone. And they can get on those phones and find everything that they want for their own entertainment.
Yes.
So.
Too much, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Too much exposure.
Well, he got 3 more years to fool around, and he got to take life serious because he's 7 years old, and we expect a whole lot more. You 4, go on and play, man. Go and enjoy yourself. Like Dr. Carole said, that's a good time when they 4 and 5 to let them play. Just play.
Yes, indeed. Well, Dr. Carole, thank you so very kindly for coming out and joining us. Once again, high gratitude for all of you who tuned in tonight, and we appreciate your support. Don't forget, go out and share this broadcast with everyone. Thank you so very kindly, Wayne. You're always on point. My man.
No doubt.
You can follow me on all social medias at Shonda M. Parks. And if you want to support me, hey, you can always buy my book, ShondaMParks.com. Singing like a songbird. Stretch your imagination. All right. Until next time, you all stay groovy, stay fine, and do something good for yourself and someone else. You've been tuned in to the Empress Hour with the mighty Media TV Network, GFN Global TV. Until next time, peace and love.